Day 3 of looking into dividing decimals, we're going to specifically look at dividing decimals by one-digit numbers. Our expectations for this lesson is to divide numbers up to 1 decimal place by whole numbers and pose and solve multi-step problems involving operations with whole numbers and decimal numbers. So if you see here in our success criteria, you will see the 4 questions that you can ask yourself to make sure that you can be successful. So first, do I understand what the question is asking me? Do I know the steps to take to properly divide decimals? Did I show my work? Did I fully answer the question? So let's look at our first problem that we can do together. So Nicole's school district holds a track meet each year. In the 100-meter hurdles for intermediate girls, the runners run 13 meters to the first hurdle. They run over 10 hurdles that are spaced equally. The last hurdle is 10.5 meters from the finish line. What is the distance between each pair of hurdles? So we have to fully understand what the question is asking us. And right here we see that they're asking us what is the distance between each pair of hurdles. And we also have a lot of numbers that can make a problem-solving question seem really confusing. But please feel free to draw pictures to try to make sense of what the problem is asking. So right now, we can draw some pictures. As you can see, we have drawn a diagram that represents what is going on in the problem. We are trying to figure out the distance between each one of these hurdles. So this is the distance between hurdle 1 and 2. This is the hurdle between 2 and 3. We know that the distance from the start to the first hurdle is 13 meters, and we know the distance between the last hurdle and the finish line is 10.5 meters. So now we have to figure out the distance between the first hurdle and the 10th hurdle, because this is the unknown distance. Meanwhile, we know that all of this is 100 meters, and we have 13 meters and 10.5 meters. So ask yourselves, how do we do that? If you said we add up these two measurements and then subtract those two measurements from 100, you are correct. So here we have 100 subtract 23.5. We have 100 because we have total of 100 meters, and 23.5 because we added 13 meters plus 10.5 meters to try to figure out the distance between the first hurdle and the 10th hurdle. So if we subtract 23.5 from 100, we get 76.5 meters. Now that we have the distance from the first hurdle to the 10th hurdle, we can now figure out the distance between each hurdle, which is our question. What is the distance between each pair of hurdles? So we know that there are 9 equal spaces because we aren't counting the hurdles themselves, we're counting the spaces. So we have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now that we know there are 9 equal spaces between the hurdles, so now we have to figure out the distance between each pair of hurdles. And how do we do that? Well, if we said we divide the 76.5 meters, because that's the distance between these hurdles, by 9, because we have 9 spaces. So let's work through this division question. So we ask ourselves, how many times does 9 go into 7? Well, we know that 9 is larger than 7, so it doesn't go in it at all. So then we ask ourselves, how many times does 9 go into 76? Well, we know that 9 times 8 equals 72. So then what do? We put our 8 above the 6 and then ask ourselves, what's 8 times 9? We know that 8 times 9 is 72. And then we subtract. And we know that the difference would be 4. And then we ask ourselves, how many times does 9 go into 4? But wait, we forgot a step. We have to bring down the 5. So how many times does this 9 go into the 45? Well, we know that 9 times 5 equals 45. So we can put our 5 up there and multiply out 5 times 9, which is 45. And then we subtract. 45 subtract 45 equals 0. So we have 0 remainder. But then we can't forget about our decimal, and we put it right above where the decimal is. So we know that our answer is 8.5 meters. But if we look at our success criteria, we know that we showed our work. We did not fully answer the question. So let's do that. And now that we've done that, we have answered our question fully. And let us do one more question together. Let's look at the question 12.5 divided by 5. What is our first step? So our first step is to make sure that we are dividing this number by this number. So let's look at how many times can 5 go into 1? Well, we know that 5 is larger than 1, so we can look at the number 12 as a whole. How many times does 5 go into 12? Well, we know that 5 times 2 equals 10. So we can put our 2 in the ones place, right above the 2. And now we have to multiply 2 times 5. We know that 2 times 5, because we just did it, is 10. And we subtract out and know that we have 2 left. Our next step is to bring the 5 down and ask ourselves, how many times does 5 go into 25? We know that 5 times 5 equals 25. So we put our 5 above the tenths place and go 5 times 5 equals 25, and we subtract out, and we have 0 remainder. But what did we forget? We forgot our decimal. Because the decimal here is between the ones and tens place, we do the same for our answer. Therefore, our answer is 2.5. So now for tomorrow's class, make sure you answer the following questions. What is 15 divided by 6? 2.8 divided by 4? 23.7 divided by 3. So get those 3 questions completed for class tomorrow. And if you have any questions, please ask me. We will be able to work in small groups and one-on-one. Have fun.